Hi there, Jonny here from JonnyLipshamStudios.co.uk, and in today's video we are going to talk about Mixbus Processing. Now, over the past few years I have done several videos talking about Mixbus compression, and I've not really talked about my entire Mixbus chain, my entire Mixbus processing system and any of that stuff, and it has changed a lot over the years. For a start, I originally was not really a big believer in putting plugins on your Mixbus. Didn't really agree with it. Didn't really see a point in it. Until some very good guys got alongside me and showed me the value of it, particularly from a console point of view. And I had starting learning how to mix on an SSL console. And they had a bus compressor which went on the Mixbus, the final output. So it made sense to me to do that, so I started doing that, and I found originally I was using stock plugins, so I just used the stock Studio One compressor, and that would do the job. That would kind of like glue things together, bind things together, and you'll find my Mixbus compression videos that talk about that in a bit more depth. I'm not going to go into that here, but then I started developing my Mixbus chain to include things like EQs and a tape machine. Now, particularly for this song, this setup that I have over here on my Mixbus works really, really well. And the idea is that I start my Mixbus process here. Sorry, my mixing process starts here. I've talked about top-down mixing before, or backwards mixing as it is sometimes known. I've talked about that quite a bit on previous videos, so I'm not going to go into that in too tremendous amounts of detail either. Suffice to say that what goes on here stays on here, and this is where I start before I add any other plugins anywhere else in the song. So before I do any processing on any other channels or on buses or parallel buses, this is where I start. I start on the Mixbus, and I start with EQ and compression and the tape machine. I set those things up first. So let me show you what I have on my Mixbus. We'll play just a little bit of the last part of this verse going into the chorus, and then I'll show you what I have on the Mixbus. Here we go.
Sipping a Madhouse Vegas coffee, she greets me and sits me down. Oh, she saw me with my lucky dime. Oh, she saw me.
Alright, so that's what I have going on my Mixbus. So let's go and take a look under the hood a little bit. So first up we have the Pultec style passive EQ in the PreSonus Fat Channel XT, and I'll show you what I'm doing because this is a trick that I learned from my good friend Pete Woj, who is an extremely talented mix engineer, and he has a YouTube channel called Mix Better Now. Go and check that out. Go and check out the videos that he has there. And I learned this from him, from watching one of his videos where he talked about what they call the Pultec trick. And basically on the Pultec EQ you can boost and cut at the same time. This 10 means attenuation. Attenuation is the same as cutting. So you can boost and cut at the same spot on the frequency switcher here. So you have 20 cycles, 30 cycles, 60 and 100. And then over here you have the high frequency, so you have 3K, 4, 5, 8, 10, 12 and 16, and then you have an attenuation selector as well. So you have the same kind of boost and attenuation thing going on over here. And then you have the bandwidth, which is kind of like your bell curve for the high frequency up here. And so what you can do is you can boost and cut at the same point, which is what I'm doing here. I'm boosting at 30 cycles, 30 hertz. I've got a little 1.4 dB boost, and then I'm cutting by 3 dB at the same point. And then I am boosting 7 dB at 16 kilohertz, and I'm not doing any attenuation at all. But what this does is this opens up the very, very low end, so you get some real girth out of the kick drum and a bit more roundness out of the bass guitar. And then over here at 16 hertz, you end up by brightening up, particularly the hi-hats, and some of the sparkle from the vocal, and some of the shimmer from the reverb and the delay. You get some of that opened up a bit more as well, without making it sound brittle or sibilant in particular. Particularly as we've got a muted trumpet in here. The muted trumpet in this song could sound too brittle if we go a little bit too crazy here. So let's play that same section again, and I will turn this EQ on and off, and you can see just how much this Pultec EQ is actually doing to the song, and it sounds epic.
Sipping a Las Vegas coffee, she greets me and sits me down.
And without it,
oh, she saw me.
and with
My lucky dime.
without,
Oh, she saw me.
and with,
My lucky dime.
so you can really hear actually just how much the bottom end rounds out nicely, and it doesn't like overwhelm, and it doesn't make it muddy, which is very, very cool. And then it brightens up the top end quite nicely as well. So the Pultec style EQ, this passive EQ in the fat channel is really, really good. Really, really like it. All right, so that's the first thing. The next thing we go into is the Brit Comp, which is an SSL style bus compressor. And it actually looks really quite like it as well. They've done really quite well with the GUI here. And I have the attack set at 30 milliseconds and the release set at 300. I could have it at 100. I currently have it at 300. And then a little bit of makeup gain, 2-to-1 ratio, and the threshold is kind of in the middle here. And the idea is we don't want to move this needle a lot. I just want to move it just a tiny little bit. Okay, so let's have a look at this.
Sipping a Las Vegas coffee, she greets me and sits me down.
Turn it off.
Oh, she saw me.
And that's on.
With my lucky
Off.
dime. Oh, she saw
On again.
me. With my lucky dime.
Okay, so with this bus compressor, it is a little bit more subtle because we're only looking at like maybe 1.5 to at the most 2 dBs worth of gain reduction here. And you know, the rest of the settings and the makeup gain make it's very, very subtle. It's very, very subtle what it's doing, but it's actually bringing the whole mix of the song together in a nice, pleasing way, bringing it nice. Glue. I think the term that most people use is glue. It kind of has a gluing effect, and it's a pleasing effect, a pleasing amount of compression. Now you can go overboard and you can really slam into this. With this particular song, this style of music, I don't want to do that because it will pump because of the amount of bass in the kick drum. You know, we want a nice thumping kick drum, but we don't want it to pump everything else. So, and you can do that with the key filter as well. You can turn the key filter so that the kick drum doesn't go through the compressor. You can certainly do that. But that's not what we're doing here. So the next thing we have is the tape machine, the J37 from Waves. And I'm not hitting this too hard because I don't want to saturate it too terribly much. We'll just play just a little bit here.
Sipping a Las Vegas coffee, she greets me and sits me down. Oh, she saw me with my lucky dime. Oh, she saw me.
So the tape machine is just adding a nice bit of analog vibe to it. I really like the sound of this tape machine. It's very, very pleasing to the ear, and particularly for this style of song, I just thought that this particular tape machine and the tape settings that I've got here, I'm using the B15 tape at 7.5 hips, and it just sounds really, really nice. But again, tape machines, you can drive it really hard and get some nice saturation on the tape itself. I'm not pushing it too overly hard, just enough so that you can just about detect that nice tape vibe that you get. So that's that, and then we're finishing up with the binaural pan, just basically to add just a little bit of extra width on the sides. Basically all this does is just turn up the sides a little bit, and open up the sides a bit, whilst not really doing very much to the middle. So that's kind of what I'm doing with the binaural pan. I'll play just a little bit, and we'll turn this on and off as well.
Sipping a madhouse Vegas coffee, she greets me and sits me down.
And off.
Oh, she saw me with my lucky dime. Oh, she saw me with.
Okay, so all this is doing really is just turning up the synth sound that I've got coming in every now and then on the extreme left and right, and the rhythm guitars as well. So that's all that's doing. It's just opening up the sides a little bit more. So there we go. So that's what I do. This guy doesn't really generally appear on every mix that I do. This is something I added in at the end of my mix. I don't mix into the binaural pan, because that would just be weird to do that. But certainly everything else, the EQ and the compressor and the tape machine, these are the first things that go on. Now at the end of the chain here, I have the limiter. It's turned off at the moment, but when I'm ready to send this out to my client, this goes on, so they are able to listen to the draft mix at the same kind of output volume as anything else that they would listen to, so they can compare it to their reference material, and they can quite easily send me some feedback as to whether this mix meets their objectives or not, rather than having to crank up the volume, because as soon as they feel like they have to crank up the volume, they think the mix is weak. So I don't want that to happen for my clients. So that's what the limiter is there for. Now when I go to master this, once they're happy with it, the limiter stays off, and I send it to the project page in Studio One without the limiter on. Alright, so there we go. That's my Mixbus processing chain. I hope you found it useful and helpful. If you have, please hit the like button, and if you have not subscribed to the channel, please do so. It helps me out tremendously when you do that. And hit the notification bell, and that way you will know when my next video is, and also you'll get a notification of when my Sunday Night Live show is on. Which is at 6 p.m. Central Time every Sunday night. So come along and get involved and ask your questions. That's kind of what the show is there for. The show is there for you guys, my subscribers, and also anybody that just happens to just pass by. Come along. And even if you're not a subscriber to my channel, come along to the show and ask your questions about music production. And I will endeavor to answer them as best I can. Okay, and until the next time, I will see you in the next video. Bye for now.